Okay, hello. I hope some more people come in, but I think we'll go ahead and get started. This is a panel about women's land tenure in the Arab region. So I hope you came to discuss this. There have been some other panels. We're going to dive a bit deeper into some data, some research, some trends that we see around women's land rights in the region. And this, of course, is a crucial topic, right? We know that it's an extremely relevant topic, but an especially complicated one in the Arab region. The land community, and there have been a number of sessions discussing the challenges and the limitations, the disadvantages that women face in the region at the moment that they are accessing land and property. And we see this tension, right, between a sort of historical balance that's being struck between religious principles, customary norms, and then a state's obligation to define secure tenure, right, to assign tenure rights for property. So today we're going to dig a bit into some of these tensions, how the rights of women, often recognized by law in a number of constitutions and in the legal framework, are facing a big confrontation at the moment that the social norms, traditions, pressures of the societies they live in still limit their access to and rights to land. So I was going to present this, but I'm going to quickly make it interactive at the suggestion of a panelist. If we were to throw out a number, an estimate, what do you think the percentage is of women in the Arab region whose names are on the legal documents to land or property? What percentage of women have their names on one of these documents? Ideas? I was going to say, you don't need both hands. 3%. Other guesses? What percentage of women in the Arab region have their name on a legal document to land or property? It's very small. It's 5, or at least it was estimated to be 5% in 2002. Huh, well.
That's also something to take into account. I think, for example, in Sweden, it's around 12% of the land, for example.
This is the introduction. I'm loving it. Go ahead.
The good thing, yes, but Arab region, what they have is the lowest in the whole world. So, yes, you are talking about 12% in Sweden. In Africa, it's also very low, but in Arab region, it's the least of all.
Please.
Today, earlier, that we attended in the high-level room for women and land. And Oman has informed us that around 90% of the ownership, total ownership, is half of them are women. But when we dig deeper to say, okay, so around 45% of the ownership is for women, are this ownership in terms of rural or urban areas. So there's no statistics specifically for the rural areas. However, for the
Please, speakers are advised to use the microphone so we can hear them and translate what they say.
I think they have no percentage in what was mentioned in the session.
Okay, this is exactly the kind of input and reflections that we want to keep getting from you throughout this session, right? So the panelists today are going to raise other numbers. We're going to be looking at what the data is telling us in terms of the pictures that it's painting. Great, we're getting our final panelist here. So concerning numbers, but also promising initiatives, right, or promising examples of collaborations and advances, impacts that we're seeing as the results of these. So I want to just jump right into it because you're a lively crowd and they're going to give you further food for discussion here. we're going to start with Ward Ansu. We'll jump back and forth a bit. But Ward Ansu is a senior land tenure officer at FAO. FAO, as we know or might not know, is the custodian of some important two major SDG indicators measuring aspects of women's access to land. So we're going to discuss a bit the indicators, but also important gaps, which we often stay talking about gaps, and these are especially relevant in this region. So what is the data telling us, where we have data in terms of what the situation of women is, but then also to discuss the challenges of getting this data, of understanding the situation of women in these countries. So, Ward, we're going to start with you, and if you can give us a sense of what the SDGs are telling us about women's land rights in the region, also the difficulties that we have with these kinds of global indicators and collecting and reporting data against them. If we could bring up the first presentation titled SDGs.
Thanks, Eva. While they're putting on the presentation. So yes, I'm Ward Ansu, but I'm here on behalf of the custodians of this work, especially the gender team at FAO, and of which some are here. So please don't shoot on the messenger. The questions can be answered also by some of us here. So yeah, let me start with the very good. So, whoa, I will have to stand because I can't see the slides from here. So just what the objective here was is to create awareness on the topic, of course, land rights, women's land rights, but also on the data accompanying these aspects as well. So we'll talk a bit on the state of the reporting of the SDGs, where we stand now, globally, and with a focus on the region. What do these data say? And then a couple of lessons learned of all this. I'm not going to spend much time on that. The importance of land rights, the importance of women's land rights. When we talk about especially agricultural land for FAO, for example, we always come back to women's land rights. We always come back to tenure, security of tenure, and then we always come back to women in these problematics. So I'll focus more on the data part. As Eva said, FAO is the custodian of some of these indicators together with UN Habitat and the World Bank. We were very pleased when the SDGs were negotiated that 3 SDGs directly related to land were uptaken compared to the Millennium Development Goals, where there was no mention of land rights. So for the first time, land rights and tenure rights around land were uptaken in 3 indicators, part of SDG 5 and 1, but of course also related to SDG 2 and broadly indirectly to many of the other SDGs. And this is SDG 5A1, SDG 5A2, and SDG 1.4.2. Not going to go in detail, but 5A1 is about the adult ownership rights to agricultural land, disaggregated by gender. So it's a practice indicator, how many women own land, etc., etc. SDG 5A2 is more a legal indicator. So here the topic of women's land rights as it is embedded, ratified through the constitution or through the legal frameworks in these countries. So very similar, but here practice, and this one is the legal one. And then SDG 1.4.2, which is not directly related to women's land rights, but touches on land rights overall and is disaggregated according to sex. So we can mobilize this one as well. 1.4.2 is about adults with secure tenure rights to land, where it's documented and perceived. There's 2 proxies there, which we will discuss later on. So where do we stand with these indicators today? Well, in 2015, when they were launched, there was almost no data for these indicators. As I just said, they were not in the MDGs, so no data collection was collected around that, at least formally. But this increased slightly for some, more rapidly for others. For 1.4.2, so the overall tenure one, today, only 33 countries report on the documentation of land. 22 report on the perception of security of land. So if we combine them in the one indicator, actually only 22 countries out of the plus minus 200, so that makes it 10% report. This remains very, very low, of course. Figures are better for the gender indicator. So 5A1, which is, I repeat, the practice one. We had 10 in 2020, 49 in 24, with 20 other countries in the pipeline today. So there we would reach about 70 countries this year, which is about 1/3 of the countries reporting to that indicator. 5A2 is the legal one. There it's much better. We have today 84 countries and 30 are in the pipeline. So that's about 110, 120 countries that will report on the legal aspects related to land. It's very important. Not only do these figures show us that there's very few countries reporting, or a bit more for 5A2, but it's also strategic because in the tier system, in the SDG system, if there's not enough countries reporting, the SDGs might fall away. And so the rule there's discussions about that if 50% of the countries do not report by 2025, these indicators might fall away. And this would be a disaster for us, for the custodian, but more and foremost for the lands community and the women's land rights community, not to have these indicators, which were a big battle between the MDGs and the MDGs, now disappearing again because there's no data or no countries reporting. So it's very strategic to keep them, to keep the work going and to keep them alive. Of course, there's other data sources, not only the SDGs on women's land rights. Here we mentioned a report that was published by FAO, Unjust Climate, where the women's land rights is combined with climate data, and where we see it's not only about the rights, but it's also about the gaps between women and men, and how climate in this case can affect them negatively. And here we show that in the case of climate related events, the gap between, or the difference of these events affecting women's land rights is, I can see 8% versus 3%. So it's not only the present difference, but also the increase of pressure on women's land rights in effects of crisis. So where do we stand today with women's land rights? Let's take a focus on 5A1, for which we have the most data. Well, it says very clearly, protections for women's land rights are low or not existent in 59, so almost 60% of the countries for which we have the data. And this is about 50%, no, 45% of the countries. Aspects related to joint registration of land, which is proxy A, financial resources for obtaining these rights, proxy D, and especially the participation in land governance by women, proxy F, are scoring very, very badly in overall through these countries. But also aspects of spousal consent for land transactions, inheritance, as was discussed in the panel before, and protection under customary law do not perform much better. It's around 40 to 50% there, where they're not present in these countries. So even in the countries where there is data, the results and the reflections of women's land rights in these countries remain very, very badly affected. To disaggregate that to the region, because for SDG 5A2 we have data here on this region. It's included in Western Asia and Northern Africa. First of all, here, data exists, so there's quite good coverage of data. Except on, especially on the evidence of provision for protecting inheritance, spousal consent, and women participation. However, there's no evidence for the region on the financial allocations and the customary law being applicable in these regions. Although there is good data, or relatively good data, as was discussed just before, and I think Didier mentioned it for the region, the results are very low in the region. So coverage by the numbers are okay, but in practice, and this is in the law, the region still scores very lowly with regards to women land rights across all the proxies, whether it's joint registration, whether it's inheritance, whether it's financial allocation, spousal consent, customary law, or land governance. Throughout, the region scores below average. You can see here the significant difference. 5A1, which is the practice indicator, shows here that in almost half of the 49 reporting countries, the share of men owning agricultural land is at least twice that of women. And that's the middle line that you see here. We can see in almost all the countries, men are above the land. Men have greater ownership of land than women in 40 of the 46 countries, and in almost half of these countries, the share of men with ownership is at least twice as big the one of women. Very importantly for the region, because this is global data, and we are unable to disaggregate to the region, because for 5A1, except for Mauritania, none of the countries in the region have reported. And so that's where now the big aspect is. We've asked us to present here the results on women land rights in the region. And if we base ourselves on the SDGs, Eva, there's no data available for the region except for Mauritania at this stage. So this is a big call. And in the previous session, they showed us, the presenter shows us the progress made in the region, which obviously is well appreciated, and we should build on these. But then the question remains, why have they not reported these progresses made here from a practice perspective with regarding women land rights and our reporting to the SDGs? Very similar image for SDG 1.4.2. Here again, I'll show you the results of these data. There's only 33 countries reporting, so the number of countries are very low. But here again, except for Mauritania, none of the countries in the region have reported. So it's impossible for us, through the SDG and a formal system, to report you how these countries are doing at this stage. None of them have reported to the SDGs. So the results I'm giving you here are the global ones. We can't dig deeper into that for the regions based on the SDGs once again. So for here, the results also are very dire. 69% of the population claim to have tenure security. However, only 30% of the populations have access to legal documentation for this land. And if you look into women, that is reduced to even half. About 17% of women only have legal documentation to land for these 33 countries. In sub-Saharan Africa and in the region, probably very similar. It goes even lower to 10%. Now, this is about the documentation. This is about the SDGs. There's complementary data sources that we have mobilized, Eva. There's several there. We've heard about Morocco and the Women Lands Observatory in the previous session. There's Landesa, etc. One that we are mobilizing and trying to push through the SDG system as well to complement the formal data sources, because there's nobody reporting. Why not using these other complementary data sources? And one of them is Prindex here, which is a global survey and which integrates, of course, women's land rights. It doesn't look at the documentation. It looks precisely at the perception of tenure security and insecurity by asking the question of how people feel of losing their lands within X number of years, in this case, five numbers of years. And globally, it shows that 23% of adults feel insecure about their lands or property rights overall. That means that 1 out of 4 persons globally feels insecure of losing his or her land. Regarding perception of tenure, they didn't find a significant gender gap. That doesn't mean that women have the same documentation. It means that their perception of insecurity does not increase globally. However, for the region, what they found is that women feel significantly and persistently more insecure, especially in the scenario of divorce or spousal death. And the graph here shows that, on contrary to the global results, where there's no significant gap, in the region there is a significant gap. You can see it between the dark brown and the light orange in the first bar, and then the full coverage in the second bar. So, for example, in Egypt, the gap is between 4 and that's 33%. So although globally the gap is not significant, for the region it is significant between men and women's land rights. Here it is presented, disaggregated here for divorce, in the case of divorce and spousal death. For the Middle East and North Africa, the box that is, the two graphs that are boxed in there. In the case of divorce, it's about 10 to 12% of men that feel insecure. For women, it's about 35%, so more than a 20% gap. Similar in spousal death, the data are very similar. So, just to conclude, there is progress made. We've heard it in the previous session. However, the region is not reporting, so very little at a formal level, SDG level, way to document this progress. So a huge effort to be made there, first from a data perspective, and secondly, what we saw here from the results as well, also from a practice perspective in the field. We want to show, however, that because of despite this dire situation, that there are best practices and that there is progress, as was presented in the previous section. And here, some of them are mentioned. The one here regards inheritance rights, with progress made in Turkey, for example. Inheritance laws do not discriminate based on gender anymore. Jordan, heirs may not renounce their rights. In Tunisia, it enables girls to receive the full inheritance, etc., etc. So we see progress being made in these cases. Matrimonial property regimes and women's customary land rights also have shown significant improvement. Case of Turkey here, equal division of property. Tunisia, spouses have the option of choosing a matrimonial asset regime that ensures that they have joint ownership. So I'll stop it here. From a data perspective, a quite dire situation from existing data or reported data to the SDGs, but also a dire situation when we start analyzing these data, despite some of the progresses made in practice.
Okay, here I am. Thanks, Ward. And a really powerful sort of overview of what we understand through the SDGs in the MENA region. If we could pull up the video next. So we see the importance here already in the first presentation of looking at multiple data sets in order to have a better understanding of the situation of women on the ground. If we were to look alone at the SDGs, we would largely be talking about gaps and indicators that are not giving us much insight into the situation of women. But these indicators are also, as Ward mentions, as we know, they're unable to measure or to quantify, to capture all of the advances that are often happening on the ground, as have been mentioned in other sessions. So we're going to go now. Oh, we're here, but we're not seeing it. We're going to go now to a video, and our colleagues from Landesa were not able to join in person. They've been impacted by the current political situation, but have been leading an important global campaign called Stand for Her Land. This is something that ILC has been collaborating with the International Land Coalition, but many of you also. And this has been a global campaign to try to organize actors at the national level, to build capacities, and then to set joint work plans, targeting increased visibility of women's rights, women's land rights at the national level. So if that's ready, we can go to that.
On the world, millions of lives are threatened by the harsh effects of climate change, poverty, and inequality. Women and girls experience these impacts disproportionately, but they remain strong in the face of adversity. And the soil they tend grows hope for the future. When secured land and property rights are a foundation for addressing global challenges and strengthening lives and communities, Stand for Her Land joins women across the world to secure their rights to the homes they live in and the resources they care for, and to engage men on the journey to equality. Whether it's a farm in Uganda or an apartment in Bangladesh, land and housing rights offer security, shelter, and economic empowerment. With land rights, women have a secure foundation to build a home or business, to protect our planet from climate change. They have equal footing in a fast-moving world. But like the land itself, there are chasms and mountains that lie between many people and equal rights to land. This is especially true for women. Only 23% of countries have laws granting women and men equal land rights. And most countries still face a gap between policy and practice. Discriminatory social norms have persisted for centuries. This leaves everyone behind, and in the face of the climate emergency, puts all of humanity at risk. Stand for Her Land is a collaborative, grassroots-led movement for gender justice. It's a partnership of land rights advocates, women's rights groups, climate activists, and allies, calling with one voice for governments to fulfill the promise of gender equal rights to land, housing, and property. Land is a foundation for power. Stand for Her Land envisions a world where this power is shared by women and men and used to benefit all. With the power of land rights to accelerate gender equality, we can face the most important global challenges. Challenges faced by people of different ages, different professions, those who live near us, and those who live far, all on our one shared planet. It's time to stand for her land and a better future for everyone.
Thank you for that. And we have not Landesa here, but Shad Mustafa, who's the regional coordinator for the MENA Region for the International Land Coalition. Shad is going to speak a bit about our work as ILC, but with Landesa in the Stand for Her Land Coalition in Uganda, an important experience that gives us some insights into the impacts that this campaign is having. And then also speaking about what the members of International Land Coalition are doing to organize and create joint work plans to address this situation on the ground. Shad, to you.
Thanks, Ava. I will be wearing two hats today. The first hat is to present the work that Stand for Her Land is doing in Uganda, which is a very inspiring story to learn from, and the other hat would be ILC activities on women land rights. I don't know if we can put the presentation on, please. So as you know, Stand for Her Land started a couple of years ago, and there was several countries where it was implemented. Uganda and Bangladesh are the best examples for that. Unfortunately, in the Arab region, there was no country where this campaign was implemented. So we hope that we could mobilize our resources to start implementing that also in the Arab region or in the MENA region within a context that's different from Asia and Africa in terms of legal system and in terms of social component of the community that plays a key role in shaping women accessibility to land. So, great, we are here. So, Stand for Her Land started in Uganda, and we would like to share the experiences that they have had on the ground as they were trying to implement the campaign and also interact with the people. The reason that we are starting from the local communities is that it is one thing to have a woman name on a document, and it is totally another thing that the woman has a control to use that document. So the campaign in itself is trying, I'm sorry, it's not possible to look at that screen, it's too far, so. So the key advocacy in that campaign, or the issues that the campaign that was focusing on, is the transformation of the discriminatory social norms and cultural practices on the ground that prevents women from access, using, owning, and controlling. And we need to understand that these four things are totally different from each other. And also how to increase funding and capacity for land management and administration institutions to help them support women land rights. So the key advocacy issues, of course, it's not something that you do once a life. There is a continuity of the issues once you start. So the continued issues that still needs to be changed on the long run is the enhancement of the legal literacy in the legal and the regulatory framework on women land rights and right holders. Also the enhancement of land justice for women, as well as the strengthening of participation and voicing the grassroots women in the land governance process. So how Stand for Her Land tried to mobilize this campaign to advocate for women land rights? It's basically starting with the grassroots mobilization. So starting with the grassroots academics, so there were training aimed to build the capacity of the grassroots women leaders to help them understand what are the elements of having a strong women accessibility to land, and also be able to organize and engage and influence the whole land governance process. So, and the second element of the campaign, it was the usage of the community engagement. So there was the community open barazas, which is the community platform where the community leaders are meeting with their community to discuss various issues. And then the community awareness raising session. And this was particularly done with churches because it's the place where the local community were gathering in. And then expanding to women market vendors, to the university students. And then they started to integrate more, so they started to have casual talks with people walking in the street about what are women land rights, why they are important. And then they started with social media as well, just to brainstorm why women land rights are important, why are we advocating for women land rights, what does it mean to have stronger accessibility to land for women. And of course, media engagement in the form of podcasting. Am I skipping something? No. So, in terms of podcasting for change. So, having some podcasts that's repeating the importance of accessibility of women land rights, the documentation of the culturally specific norms on land access, ownership, and control, sitting down with cultural premiers and streamlining that, and then the training and formation of a pool of gender trainers to who are now leading community dialogues with men and women. So that all led in creating a lobbying movement and facilitating policy review consultations. So this started with working with the Parliamentary Women Association to lobby and facilitate discussion around the marriage bill, which seeks to harmonize marriage laws in Uganda. And due to these collective efforts, the bill was tabled in the parliament just last year. And this week, as we are speaking now, Stand for Her Land will be presenting that to the parliament. So, this is also a way that leads to national dialogues. Stand for Her Land engaged in several dialogues at the national level with various stakeholders in various positions, governmental, civil society, academia, and researchers to collaboratively discuss and seek solutions to issues around women land rights and the sector as a whole. So, as you see, the elements that we went through, you start from awareness raising, you start with the local community, and then you expand through social media, podcasting, just repeating over and over how important that we give women their rights until you reach the decision-making level. So, this is Stand for Her Land hat, and I see many of you were nodding as I was mentioning some of the points about how to interact on the local community level. It's another context from Uganda, but in terms of structure, it's the same. So we can act in the Arab region just like any other region and any other country outside the region. What we need, and this brings me to the other hat of ILC, what we need is engagement. And ILC, to have this engagement, have started several initiatives and pledges in other regions. One of them is Women for Women platform. Women for Women platform is simply said, women talking to women, giving the pulse to each other to start mobilizing resources to voice women rights to land. And this is something very simple. And also Gender Action Plan, which introduces how gender justice can be a way to implement not only in working spaces, but also outside that till we reach the land thematic. The implementation of Stand for Her Land and implementation of other components within the civil society, within the local communities, is a sustainable way, or prove to be a sustainable way, because you are working on the very grassroots level. You are working with the people who are actually suffering from the negligence, especially the women that are facing the issue of not even sometimes having the identity that allow them to have a paper to land or control or even access to land. So this is the reality on the ground, as we saw in numbers, and these are the campaigns and the means that could lead to a change in the situation of women land rights on the long run that enables probably better numbers appearing in indicators and charts, and also better livelihood for women in the region. Under any legal system, we know that the legal systems are developed enough to address women's land rights, yet the norms and traditions are overruling the legal system that's in place. Thanks, Eva.
No, thanks to you, Shad. Sure, of course. Great, a great perspective on the kinds of organizing that a number of organizations in the community are leading, and connecting really that participation gap, the involvement gap that we even saw reflected in the legal indicator, and addressing that directly through their own initiatives. So we're going to go next to Didier Sagarchai from the World Bank. And he is going to speak to us about a flagship report that the World Bank has released on land in the MENA region. This is going to touch, of course, on women's land rights, but goes beyond in terms of giving an overview of land and how it's being governed and managed in the region. So, Didier, over to you. Eager to hear main findings of this report and then its relevance to women.
Thank you very much, Eva. As she mentioned, I'm from the World Bank. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I'm a senior land administration specialist. And right now, the World Bank is having projects in Palestinian territories and Djibouti, in Egypt, and hopefully in Jordan to come soon. Those are land projects. I'm going to talk about the report that was released in 2023. And this report, I have brought some copies with me for you to see if you can put on the presentation. And people can also, I noticed there is no Wi-Fi, so usually people can download English, French, and Arabic version on the website. There are some few copies also there to grab. So a little bit about this report. I will talk about some of the main findings. I'm not a fan of putting a lot of words in the presentation, so I will use some graphs, and I have to give credit to the author of the report, Anna Corsi and Haris Serod, who are not here, but contributed to this report. Just to start the presentation, there is in the region scarcity of land, and that scarcity of land with the climate change and the population growth is going to create a lot of crises. We have seen these, and we are seeing these in the region. I don't want to give the examples. Everyone here can know. But if you look at the percentage of agricultural land has been diminishing, while the land which is being used in urban areas is increasing, and these will always create problems with land for agricultural purposes. And then when we look at cities, there is a lot of growth in terms of urban population. The urban population in the MENA region is expected to be increased by 40% by 2050, which means we need more land to have these people if we don't build a lot in height. And also the crop land is keeping shrinking in the region, so you could that's going to create a lot of pressure on whoever is managing land in the region. There are also issues that were looked at in this report, is how firms or companies access land. And interestingly, in the region, to be a company and to be able to access land, you need to have political connections. So we can see on the screen, so in some of the countries you need to be highly connected to the political people, and I will tell you the reasons why behind, because to be able to access land. So that's also worrisome when you compare this to the rest of other regions, and MENA is having that very big issue. We have in the region very outdated in some of the places, outdated laws and complex land systems. And some of these systems, for example, we have procedures that are very complicated. I can give an example of Egypt, where we're trying to implement a project on property management. You have many. Yesterday, my colleague Hussein was talking about how these processes are complicated, but also we have the cost of registration of property becoming high, with also a high number of now slums, sometimes vertical slums in the region. And then when we look at when we look at women in business, and throughout the years, from the last 50 years, the region has been remaining stagnant in terms of having women accessing control to asset management. And we see that in the other regions, this has been changing a little bit. If you look at southern Sub-Saharan Africa, a little bit of increase in terms of how women are getting access. So a campaign that Shahad was mentioning, this is something we need to look at in the Arab region, how this Stand for Our Land campaign can help in solving such problems. Again, this echoes what Ward mentioned. So women are more likely to have fear of losing their lands, and in the region it's more. Compared to the rest of the world, and we see a lot of differences in different countries on what is happening. There is also something I wanted to mention here. Sometimes the forms that people are using to register land, if you look at simple forms used for registration of properties, you only see they provide one space for names, and this space will only be for men. If something, we have seen some countries, if you change only the form, you change a lot of things without necessarily changing the laws. Then we have also in the MENA region, a lot of land is owned by the public, is public land. And that's why I said previously that to be able to get access to land, some firms, you need to be politically connected. So and also the property tax in the region is very low compared to other regions. It's almost less than 1% of GDP. So there is also some countries who are not taxing or taxing very low the vacant land, which leads to speculation on those lands in the region. Then the corruption. Corruption is all over the world in terms of land, but also show how countries are performing in terms of corruption in the region. It's also something that the report was looking at. What I want to go to at the end is what are some of the policy implications we can have here. Already these have been talked during the conference. A lot of people are mentioning about clarifying the rights and cadastre and boundaries, and clarifying different mandates of institutions. In some countries, we have many institutions, up to 5 institutions managing land, and this creates confusion. And also having the digital systems. We have in the region some of the best countries, like the Gulf countries. They have good systems that other countries can learn from in terms of digital systems, but we have other countries that are still behind. Issues of property valuation, where some property valuation and taxation, countries need to address them. And transparency in terms of land management and public land management is also one of the key elements. For agricultural land, yes, consolidation of land, FAO works very much on this, but it's also something that needs to look at. Smart and climate smart agriculture is a practices are necessary in the region because of the we see that the agricultural land is being reduced, and conversion of rural to urban land needs to be controlled in a way or another. I want to go fast, but in this slide I want to focus on one thing here, which is about the thinking of the spatial policies, especially the last point I mentioned there about vacant land tax. When countries don't think about these taxes, and a lot of land is also owned by the public, there is less going into the coffer, but also there is some countries like Palestine last year, 2023, it was not last year, they had a good law, the law number 6 of 2023, which is a new law in terms of inheritance, which other countries can learn from. And for example, this law is helping when inheritance is introduced, and then people have to pay for the inheritance fee. These fees can be referred until the case is done in the court, which initially was preventing people from going to the court. Now, if you go to the court, you don't need to pay the fees for the court fees. You can pay them once the case is resolved. Some of those kind of things, they are minimal, but they resolve prevention of people taking their cases to the courts. Lastly, I think this question Eva asked about it, how many women are registered on immovable properties, land, or housing, so 5%, which is very low. And we have, in the region, we have, compared to other regions, the MENA region where we have the literacy rate in other region. But if you compare the literacy rate in the region and the women who have access to jobs, that's also another contradiction. So how then can we also work on having property for women, that having women on the land or property documentation so that they can create businesses is also something that needs to be looked at and is recommended. So that's where I want to end my presentation. I want to also say that I'm representing the World Bank at Stand for Our Land Steering Committee. And on a personal level, I always want to advocate for women's land rights. Why? Because women are our mothers and women are our sisters. And so I always tell men, we need to fight for the land, the rights of our mothers and our sisters in terms of having access to land and access to housing and access, having their documentation done. I always tell people on a personal level, why do I prevent my mother having access to a property? How can you, I'm now addressing to men in the room, how can we work together as men to keep pushing for this element? I'm talking on a personal level, that's not the World Bank talking, it's me, Didier, talking. How can we as men in the MENA region increase the 5% to 10%? This is a question I want to leave you thinking about, and I want to hear from you during the discussion. How can we, men, let's start with ourselves, how can we work to increase from 5% on the number of women who are on the property to 10%, maybe in how many years, and be able also to answer to the question that Ward asked, how can we facilitate that we can have data in the countries so that we can monitor how we are progressing. I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Didier. Great presentation, and we already have our first discussion question. So men in the room, all of us, we can start thinking. Yes, yeah. We have one more presentation, though, and then we do want to get back to this interactive discussion about solutions and plans that can be made together. But I want to go now to Abdelrahim Idrais, a researcher working on land rights in the region, who's going to talk to us a little bit about how social norms and traditions are affecting reporting and what we understand about women's land rights. To you.
So thank you, the chair. I will make my presentation in Arabic, so you can use your gadgets for translation. Thank you. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. إذن
Hello, in the Arabic region, according to the SDGs, I will talk about the problematics, cultural, legal, and social problematics that stops women from having the rights to access.
So I can start. إذن مداخلتي ستكون حول كيفية حماية حقوق النساء في الولوج إلى الأرض في المنطقة العربية وذلك على ضوء أهداف التنمية المستدامة. فسأتحدث عن ما هي المعيقات الثقافية والاجتماعية التي تحول دون ولوج آمن إلى الأرض وكذلك لها أثرها على التقارير أو على المؤشرات المرتبطة بأهداف التنمية المستدامة.
Here in the Arabic region.
فكما تعلمون فإن ولوج النساء إلى الأرض يواجه تحديات كبيرة في المنطقة العربية. متدخلين قبلي أبرزوا الحالة الراهنة لمؤشرات التنمية المستدامة والتي تعكس بشكل واضح وجلي ولوج المرأة العربية إلى الأرض. فالمؤشرات هي فقط ترجمة للوضعية ولكن أهم شيء يمكن البحث عنه هو لماذا هذه الوضعية. فتتعدد الأسباب التي تحول دون ولوج المرأة إلى الأرض بينما هو قانوني اجتماعي ثقافي وكذلك اقتصادي. ثم الأهداف التنمية المستدامة جاءت وخصوصا الهدف الأول والخامس من أجل إعادة تشكيل منصورة المرأة وكذلك إعادة تمكينها من الوصول إلى الأرض. ولكن تبقى هناك إشكاليات متعددة إشكاليات كثيرة جدا تحول دون وصولها إلى هذه الأرض. فما هي سبل تجاوز هذه الإشكاليات وكيف يمكن تحقيق العدالة في ولوج النساء إلى الأرض؟ فأولا عندما نتحدث عن المنطقة العربية نتحدث عن أزيد من 14.5 مليون كيلومتر مربع أي تقريبا 10% من مساحة العالم ليس بالأمر المستهان. تنقسم هذه المنطقة إلى 22 دولة عربية كل دولة لها نظامها الاجتماعي والثقافي والسياسي. تصل نسبة النساء في الوطن العربي إلى ما يقارب 48% تقريبا نصف المجتمع العربي كله نساء. ولكن لا تتعدى نسبة ولوج النساء إلى الأرض في أحسن الدول العربية
of women of this demography. However, only 15% of them have access to land.
إذن مقارنة بنسبة النساء في الوطن العربي مع نسبة ولوجها إلى الأرض فترون أن اللون شاسع وكذلك الفرق كبير جدا. فهذه مسألة ظاهرة
there is a huge difference.
فعندما ننظر إلى أهداف التنمية المستدامة فإن الهدف الأول والهدف الخامس يسعى إلى محاربة الفقر أولا ثم كذلك محاربة الفرق بين الجنسين وتحقيق المساواة بين الجنسين ولكن عبر آلية ولوج النساء إلى الأرض كآلية من أجل محاربة الفقر وكذلك محاربة هذا التمييز. تبرز المؤشرات 1.4.2 و5A1 و5A2 وضعية ولوج النساء إلى الأرض بصفة آمنة. هذه المؤشرات تم وضعها لتكون ترجمة للوضعية الحقيقية على الأرض لولوج النساء إلى الأرض. تعتمد هذه المؤشرات على بيان وضعية حصول النساء على الأرض، وكذلك على الوثائق والمستندات التي تبين وتعزز هذه الملكية، وكذلك على القوانين التي تسهر على حماية ولوج النساء إلى الأرض. فبالتالي هذه الوضعية لا يمكن أن تظهر بشكل جلي في غياب المعطيات والبيانات التي يمكن من خلالها رصد الوضعية، تحليل الوضعية، وكذلك القيام بالمتعين في يعني توجيه الفعل العمومي وتوجيه كذلك السياسات والقوانين وغيرها من أجل زيادة نسبة ولوج النساء إلى الأرض بشكل آمن. بالنظر إلى وضعية المؤشرات حاليا، ربما المتدخلين قبلي أشاروا إلى أن المؤشرات اليوم هناك إشكالية غياب وقلة المعطيات المرتبطة بهذه المؤشرات. فغياب المعطيات هو على نوعين. النوع الأول هو في المؤشر بحد ذاته، فهناك غياب ربما في بعض الدول وفي كثير منها تحدث يعني المتدخل أندري عن كون فقط موريتانيا في المنطقة هي الوحيدة التي لها يعني تقرير عن المؤشرات، في حين أن غالبية الدول في منطقة شمال إفريقيا والشرق الأوسط تغيب عندها هذه المؤشرات، تغيب عندها كذلك تقارير حول هذه المؤشرات. فالإشكالية الأولى هي مرتبطة بعدم وجود منهجية واضحة يعني معتمدة بشكل رسمي في جمع البيانات المتعلقة بهذه المؤشرات ونشرها وفق تقارير رسمية. فبالتالي البيانات الإحصائية أو النظم الإحصائية لا تأخذ بعين الاعتبار هذه المؤشرات في جمع المعطيات. والإشكال الثاني هو في عدم قدرة المؤشرات على عكس الواقع ولوج المرأة على الأرض بسبب ضعف الولوج أصلا والتحديات التي تواجهه. فالمؤشر عندما يعطي نسبة قليلة فإما أنه لم يتم جمع المعطيات وفق المؤشر بطريقة صحيحة، وإما أن أصلا ليست هناك يعني ولوج للأرض بحيث يمكن عكسها بهذه المؤشرات. فإذا المؤشرات هي في حد ذاتها يعني تعكس فقط الواقع الذي يمكن أن تعيشه المرأة في ولوجها إلى الأرض. إذن فما هي الإشكاليات الثقافية والاجتماعية الخفية التي تحول دون ولوج المرأة إلى الأرض والتي تعكسها المؤشرات في الحالة الثانية؟ أولا هناك أسباب مرتبطة بالمكان التقليدي للمرأة في البنية الأسرية. فعندما نتحدث عن المرأة في الأسرة فإننا نتحدث عن بنت، يعني بنت رجل، ونتحدث عن أم رجل وأخت رجل وزوجة رجل. فبالتالي البنية الأسرية الاجتماعية في المنطقة العربية خصوصا لا تزال تجعل المرأة تحت وصاية الرجل، وهذا إشكال ثقافي يعني أساسا. فنوعية العلاقة القائمة بين النساء والرجال داخل الأسر لها يعني أثرها الكبير على إمكانية ولوج المرأة أصلا إلى الأرض، لأنها تكون دائما تحت وصاية الرجل. ثم في الثقافة العربية أن الأرض هي أصلا مخصصة للرجل بحكم أن الرجل هو المسؤول عن العمل وكذلك عن إعالة الأسرة. فبالتالي عندما تكون الأرض أصلا يعني هي خصوصية للرجل وتكون المرأة تحت وصاية الرجل، فلكم أن تتصوروا كيف يمكن للمرأة أن تعبر إلى الأرض يعني في هذه الحالة. ثم إشكالية المكان المحدود للمرأة في اتخاذ القرارات. يعني أغلب الهيئات والبنيات العشائرية مثلا في مختلف الدول العربية يعني لا يمكن للمرأة أن تكون في الهيئة التقريرية أو يكون لها صوت أو إمكانية تقرير أو إمكانية اتخاذ قرارات. فبالتالي عندما نتحدث عن الأراضي في المنطقة العربية نتحدث عن نسبة كبيرة جدا هي في ملكية العشائر والقبائل. فبالتالي المرأة ليس لها وصول أصلا إلى القرار، فكيف أن يكون لها وصول إلى الأرض؟ ثم كذلك تأثير التقاليد الاجتماعية على نظام الإرث. تحدث المتدخلون قبلي عن إشكالية الإرث. الإرث ليست إشكالية في حد ذاتها، وإنما الإشكالية في التقاليد والأعراف التي تحول دون تطبيق الإرث بشكل عادل وبشكل سوي كما هو معروف في الأنظمة الشرعية في المنطقة. ثم كذلك هناك الخلافات الأسرية الكثيرة والمتعددة التي تكون أساسها هو الأرض ويكون إشكالها هو يعني هل يعني مقبول داخل الأسرة أن تكون للمرأة أرض أو ليس لها أرض، فبالتالي تخلق نزاعات أسرية تصل إلى المحاكم إلى غير ذلك. ثم إذن قبل الوصول إلى الحلول سنتحدث عن النظم القانونية، لأن كما رأينا هناك نظم اجتماعية مؤثرة ونظم قانونية تتعدد الأسباب القانونية التي تحول دون ولوج المرأة إلى الأرض. أهمها أن هناك قوانين كثيرة جدا تؤثر الأرض. تحدث قبلي على أن نسبة كبيرة من الأرض أصلا هي في ملكية الدولة، فبالتالي كيف يمكن للمرأة أن تصل إلى الأرض هي في ملكية الدولة وهي في حاجة أولا إلى أن تكون لها مكانة اقتصادية وقدرة اقتصادية من أجل الوصول إلى هذه الأرض كذلك بعض الخصوصيات المحلية في الدول العربية لا يمكن للمرأة أن تصل إلى نوعيات من الأرض بحكم عدم قدرتها يعني أو عدم تمكينها لا سياسيا ولا اجتماعيا ولا اقتصاديا. هناك بعض القوانين في بعض الدول ولا أعمم تميز بين الرجل والمرأة في الولوج إلى الأرض. هناك بعض الإصلاحات التي تم القيام بها ولكن لا تزال هناك بعض الحالات التي فيها عدم مساواة بين الجنسين. هناك تضارب بين المقتضيات القانونية والمقتضيات العرفية. قد يكون هناك قانون يحكم أو لا يسمح للمرأة بولوج الأرض ولكن الأعراف السائلة في القبائل في المناطق تمنع من تحقيق هذه المسألة بشكل يعني صحيح. ثم كذلك هناك عدم إجبارية حماية الحيازة أو الملكية عن طريق سندات الملكية. فيمكن أن يكون للمرأة أرض ولكن بشكل شفوي بشكل فقط عرفي دون أن يكون لها مستندات والمؤشرات تعتمد على عدد المستندات وطبيعتها ونوعيتها. فبالتالي لا يمكن أن يتم ترجمة هذه الحيازة دون وجود مستندات. ثم كذلك إشكالية توثيق الحيازة والمعاملات التجارية يعني حول الأرض. هناك كثير من المعاملات يتم القيام بها. هناك مثلا المرأة تسمح لأخيها باستغلال الأرض وبعد ذلك يتم يعني أخذها بشكل يعني غير سليم. ثم ضعف وعي النساء بالمقتضيات القانونية المؤثرة للرجال. في كثير من الأحيان قمنا بدراسة في شمال إفريقيا يعني حول ولوج المرأة إلى الأرض خصوصا في المنطقة في المجال الفلاحي. فوجدنا أن أغلبية النساء عندهم إشكالية في الوعي أولا بأن هناك قوانين تسمح لها بالوصول إلى الأرض. فبالتالي هذا الحاجز التوعوي هذا الحاجز التكويني يعني يكون ربما ضد إمكانية ولوج المرأة إلى الأرض. وحتى إن كان لديها علم فليس لها يعني الدراية الكافية بالمساطر وغيرها. بالتالي هذا المدخل التكويني المدخل التعريفي المدخل التحسيسي مدخل أساسي من أجل تمكين المرأة من الولوج إلى الأرض. بعض الحلول الممكنة التي يمكن العمل عليها من أجل أولا الرفع من نسبة ولوج المرأة إلى الأرض وبالتالي القيام بمتعين في يعني في نشر المعطيات. أولا توعية النساء بحقوقهن في الولوج. لا بد من عمل توعوي يكون أساسه هو التكوين وهو التحسيس. يعني كما رأينا مبادرة ستاند فور هيلاند فهي مبادرة تم تأسيسها من أجل هذه الغاية. فأول بداية للتغيير هي الوعي بما يمكن تغييره. وضع برامج تكوينية للنساء حول القوانين المرتبطة بالأرض. يعني ربما كانت هناك مبادرة في المغرب يعني أعطي مثال وهو فيما يتعلق بالأراضي الجماعية. كانت هناك دورات تكوينية للنساء من أجل الوعي بحقوقهن في الوصول إلى الأرض وكيفية استعمالها. كانت هناك مواكبة تأطير في المجال الفلاحي. إعداد برامج ومشاريع تمكن النساء من الولوج إلى الأرض وتمكينهن من المستندات. أعطي كذلك مثال في المغرب حول الأراضي الجماعية تم تمكين النساء من الأرض تم إعطائهم المستندات الملكية تمت مواكبتهم من أجل إنجاز مشاريع فلاحية. فكان هذا برنامج مندمج من أجل تمكين النساء من الولوج إلى الأرض. ثم كذلك دعم انخراط النساء في الهيئات التقريرية. وفي الأخير الأخذ بعين الاعتبار حق النساء في الولوج إلى الأرض عند رسم السياسات العمومية ووضع البرامج العمومية. فكخلاصة لما تم الحديث عنه لا يمكن لمؤشرات التنمية المستدامة أن تظهر حقيقة ولوج المرأة إلى الأرض في غياب أصلا يعني الشروط الأساسية لتمكين هذه المرأة من الولوج إلى الأرض. الاس أو المؤشرات ليست إلا ترجمة تقنية رقمية إحصائية لوضعية أصلا تعاني منها المرأة في المنطقة العربية لا بد من العمل عليها بشكل أساسي. فضرورة توعية النساء بحقهن في الأرض أساسية جدا. ضرورة نشر البيانات أصلا المتواجدة والموجودة والأخذ بعين الاعتبار بنية المؤشرات في الأعمال الإحصائية في هذا الميدان. وأخيرا لا بد من إشراك المجتمع المدني وكذلك الجامعات والباحثين في عملية جمع البيانات وفق منهجية المؤشرات. كل هذا سيمكن من مواجهة ضعف ولوج المرأة إلى الأرض أولا ثم كذلك ضعف ترجمة هذه الوضعية عبر مؤشرات التنمية المستدامة. و
India translates and interprets the SDGs based on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdelrahim. And I think kind of closing the circle for us here, bringing us back. We want to spend, it's late, we had a lot of great presentations, but spend a few minutes with you getting some feedback. Of course, if you have questions for the panelists, those are very much welcome. But we've also heard solutions that are coming to the table, right? We know that the SDGs provide a framework. The SDGs tell us what we would like to be able to see in the MENA region, and that this would be a point of departure. in order for there to be policies that would respond to needs. SDG 582 tells us what we would like to see in the legal framework in these countries. A solution's been put forward in the example of Stand for Her Land. If there were a community of actors in the MENA region that would agree to work together more systematically on these issues, the International Land Coalition with Landesa, others, has these regional platforms that bring together actors that want to work specifically on these topics in a more...
In Morocco, for example, two types. So we have the legal document when you have the property under your name, and the land registration or cadastre. And we have the collective lands. For example, we have some lists when we have women with the rights to have lands, but they are not documented, so they don't have those lands in their document or registered. For the Article 72, which is referring to the collective lands,
et qui essaye un petit peu d'organiser les terres collectives. Donc, n'oublions pas que selon le Daher de 1919, qui sert de cadre aux terres collectives, les terres collectives, elles appartiennent dans l'indivision aux communautés ethniques. Et donc, on ne peut pas les partager. On a le droit de l'usage et de on n'a pas le droit ils sont inaliénables. Mais avec ces nouvelles lois de 2019, 61, 62 et 73, 63, 17, on vient changer un petit peu cette inaliénabilité pour protéger les terres collectives. Et de là, on passe un petit peu vers ce qu'on appelle la melkisation. C'est-à-dire le harcèlement de ces terres collectives. Et pour donner une part, pas toute la totalité de cette assiette foncière importante, mais donner une part à certains ayants droit. Donc,
if you have the right of this land, of course.
Les femmes, elles ont eu en termes de melkilisation.
How do you calculate?
Elles ont perdu
How do you calculate the percentage? Do you calculate it and
l'ensemble
from all the two types of documentation that I have just mentioned? In order to have a database, so you should go into specificities. I'm just talking about the Moroccan case because I think there is the other regions that each one of them have different type of documentation. My question it was about us. So what's the type of documents that we should base on in order to have those analyses?
Thanks. Amina, a question about the kinds of documents. If you can go right behind, I see two more there, here, and there.
Great. Thank you, everyone. My name is Rebecca Helen. I work as a gender advisor at KIT in the Netherlands, and I'm here as a part of Land at Scale, focal point for knowledge management. And generally, as a gender advisor, I often try to avoid talking about women because gender is often conflated with women, although we're all gendered beings. So, and also in this case, I wonder if the issue here is the lack of women's awareness of their rights, or if it might be comprehensive, oppressive systems that is actually the barriers for everyone to have access, control, and right to land. So that's a reflection. However, I do agree that there's a need to have good data in order to show this. So I'm also curious, and this question is directed to Ward, what incentives, encouragement, accompaniment, support do you think member states need in order to report on these important indicators? And then I also have a question about, I think it was Didier who mentioned there's a lot of public land in the region. How can this be used in order to ensure fair and just distribution of resources? And in this case, we're talking about land. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Already collecting a number of questions. Let's take one more, then we'll do a first round of reactions, then we'll come back. Yeah. to you.
Merci beaucoup. Je remercie les présentateurs.
Thank you, dear presentators.
Je suis Innocent Antoine Huigui de
I am Innocent Antoine from Unigency Land in Africa.
J'ai deux questions. La première, d'abord, c'est un peu une contribution parce que nous avons entendu un peu l'insuffisance des données, l'indisponibilité des données. Et deuxième chose, en fait, la chose que j'ai aussi entendue, il y a une question d'harmonisation du format de collecte de
harmonizing the format of data collection in the Arab world. Idrissa talks about
alors, la question est que, alors, en tant que panéliste, qu'est-ce que vous prévoyez pour harmoniser? Parce que tant que ce n'est pas harmonisé, les données sont diversifiées suivant différentes variables et finalement ça ne permet pas d'analyser pour avoir des données de qualité qu'il faut. Donc, moi je pense que est-ce qu'il n'est pas bon d'avoir une plateforme multi-acteurs pour harmoniser ces points de vue et aussi faciliter la collecte des données dans la région. Deuxième question. Il y a une question que je regarde un peu. Je ne sais pas si vous vous intéressez beaucoup plus aux données qui est liée à l'entrepreneuriat des femmes. Parce qu'en réalité, ce que nous faisons, c'est un peu du plaidoyer. Mais aujourd'hui, le débat a dépassé la question de plaidoyer. Parce que quand on parle de plaidoyer, ça fait appel à la politique. Donc quand on va sur les questions pratiques, comme l'entrepreneuriat des femmes, c'est beaucoup plus pratique. Et on montre l'intérêt de la femme dans la communauté. Et à partir de ce moment, ça facilite le dégainement donc des chefs de communauté, ça facilite, ça facilite un peu la libération des coutumes, ça facilite un certain nombre de choses pour permettre à ce que les autorités à divers niveaux commencent à comprendre que l'histoire a changé, le narratif a changé. Donc je voudrais faire le pont entre l'intérêt sur les terres, la propriété sur les terres et pour finir l'accès. Donc si vous pouvez essayer de faire ce pont, je crois qu'on va pouvoir trouver une
solution to change narratives. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, I think we're just going to take them all, and then we're going to only have time for a round of reaction. So if we could make it short, I'm sorry to ask that, but yes, here and then there, and then we'll go to a round of reactions.
Joseph Shekla from Housing and Land Rights Network. Want to thank Shahid particularly for using the formula access to, use, and control, because access to any right is a figure of speech that's meaningless without the other parts of the formula. I have a question for Didier. In the chart that showed fear of losing land, Israel appears with men and women equally fearing land at about 20%. This seems to correspond to the same percentage of the Palestinian Arab citizens of Israel. Is that a coincidence? And Abdurrahim, if I could ask, in Islamic practice, especially in Asia, can I ask in English? That there's an exegesis that says, ijtihad, that's debated that the problem of inequality is not in the text of the Quran. There's nothing in the Quran that prevents a woman from having equal or even more inheritance. Have you found this discourse at all in the Arab world?
Okay, we have one more here, and if we can squeeze in a final one, I'm sorry. Can we go to? And maybe just to start summarizing, I think we're seeing some national examples of challenges with the kind of documents or the way that you would capture land, the way that it is registered in countries. Go ahead. Well, then I'll finish.
Perfect. First of all, thank you very much for your very valuable presentations. So the first one was how to encourage countries to participate in data collection. And the second one is, once you have all of this data, What are your most effective levers for action, and how can you persuade the states to change their policies, especially regarding to women, and to involve more women in the decision-making process? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one more here.
Merci pour toutes les présentations. C'était très intéressant.
For all the presentations, it was very interesting
les défis sont
to see how the challenges were presented in different contexts. This brings us as well to the difficulty of
les différences de contexte entre les différents pays.
On
a vu comment les normes sociales et culturelles, comment ils interviennent dans l'accès des femmes aux fonciers, aussi le contrôle. Pas seulement question d'accès. Ma question sur la disponibilité de données, je donne par exemple le cas du Maroc, même s'il ne figure pas dans les pays qui donnent une base de données complète pour justement renseigner les indicateurs des ODD. L'information, elle existe. Il y a une agence dédiée pour l'immatriculation. Il y a des ministères de tutelle qui ont les attestations de propriété. Donc, on sait très bien que l'information existe. La question est de comment aider ces gouvernements ou les engager à nous donner en fait cette situation réelle sur le terrain et comment les pousser à souscrire à une réelle remontée d'informations sur ces questions qui sont très importantes pour nous aussi pour analyser la situation et de sortir des préjugés sur des thèmes comme l'accès des femmes aux fonciers, sur la part de propriété, etc. Et de régler cette question une fois pour toutes. Et une deuxième question, en fait, on passe très rapidement sur les questions des normes sociales et culturelles.
And concerning social and cultural norms, I would like to address the question.
Sur des études sociologiques aussi, sur
qualitative studies and sociological studies, we know
les situations sont très différentes et on a besoin de renseigner aussi les politiques publiques dans ce sens, mais on a besoin d'une information plus fine.
And we need more fine data on some contexts, particular contexts. For example, in the case of collective land in Morocco,
situation de gestion coutumière des terres, et on a besoin de savoir plus et de manière assez fine sur ces situations-là.
In some countries, we need fine data about this. Thank you.
Thank you. The final comment, and I'm sorry, it's great to hear from all of you on this topic, but we'll have to close. Yeah. Okay.
يعطيكم العافية. احنا بنعرف انه القانون يطبق فوق الجميع، فبالنسبة لنا مثلا بالأردن الشرع ما في أي إشكال، ولكن المشكلة زي ما تفضل الدكتور عبد الرحيم إنه الأعراف والتقاليد وثقافة العيب اللي بتمنع السيدة إنها تتنازل عن حصتها في الأرض. لكن أنا برى ممكن إنه شو الآلية اللي إحنا بنشوفها في توعية النساء في هذا الموضوع دون ما نعمل أي تحسس بين الرجل والمرأة في هذا الحق. إضافة لذلك ممكن إنه إحنا يكون لنا دور مع الحكومات إنها تفرض القانون كما هو في حق المرأة بعد ما تأخذ حقها، هل يمكنها هي صاحبة القرار بالتنازل؟ فإحنا بالنسبة لنا في منطقتنا هاي من المشاكل الكبيرة بصراحة بنواجهها. شكرا.
Okay, right behind you. Thank you. Sorry, no, we can't keep going. We're not going to be able to close. Please, and
greetings.
Quickly.
My name is Noor Al-Huda Baqa, and I'm a student. I just wanted to give a little remark to what other people before me have said, and they have brilliantly said it. It's a cultural problem more than a religious one, since in the religion, as I have done some studies, there's only 4 cases where a woman inherits less than a man, and more than 10 cases when she inherits equally or more than a man. The problem is in the shame culture, the aib. What will you need this land for? Why don't you just give it to your brother? He will use it in a better context. Having a woman gain access to land is just giving her independence, which means she will be also saying no, which is something that culturally in Arab culture and historically has been seen as quite problematic.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're picking up on important themes here. So I'm going to go through the panel. You can pick up kind of what's most relevant to you. The question of cultural norms, how that's playing out, where that's coming from, what it's perpetuating, harmonization of data collection, how you do that across diverse contexts, how to incentivize and support data collection, and the role that civil society can play in doing that. There were some other things on public land, female entrepreneurs. Pick up what you'd like to. Can I start with you, Didier?
Thank you very much. These are very good questions and good discussions. And I want to start with from what Amina asked about. I'm not very familiar with Morocco, but one of the things, so the question about the data, the type of documentation we're talking about here, it's both, either those from the land registry or those even which are recognized by the legal framework. The question you asked about where the land is owned, communal land, is very valid. I just want to give a contribution on what I have seen in other countries, whereby people, the communal land, it will remain communal land, but people will have documentation on their use, including both men and the women in which are on those communal land. That's something probably that could be looked at to answer to what you have asked. The use fruits could also be documented, and someone has a document showing that his or her, she is using this land, this type of land within the communal land. That's one of the contributions. The question about public land, which was asked, what should be done? I think I will answer it in one word. It's just a transparency. Sometimes that's what is the biggest problem. So I want to speculate on other things, but whenever this land is transparent and it's the process of acquiring it is very clear, very well documented, and with very clear procedures that could answer to how this land could be availed and be used for fairly and put in the use for other people. Innocent mentioned about entrepreneurship. In my presentation, I mentioned that in the region we have more educated women compared to other regions, but we have less them employed or working because they don't even have access to the documentation of what they own, which can be used as a collateral, for example, to get access to finances. So I agree with you, we need always to link that entrepreneurship with ownership and also see how this can lead to have more women empowerment. We need to talk about women empowerment than only about land. Land is one component, but there are more about that. Last questions from Joseph, if the issue of Israel and the numbers. Actually, when I was doing the presentation, I just realized that the numbers I was using are the 2020 Prindex number. Actually, and the world presented much more recent numbers. So I will refer you to the Prindex website. Then we can later on have a discussion to start to try to understand. But these are perceptions, so we can talk about and try to understand how these perceptions are working. So I'll stop here and leave the other question to others. Okay.
Thanks. I will try to keep it short, answering those directed to civil society and the awareness raising on the local level. To answer the question from Jordan, the awareness raising is not just targeting women. You need also to target men to understand why we need to give women accessibility to land. And as it was referred, it's a cultural problem rather than Sharia law problem, because we know that there is a law, everything is written, even though not covering everything in some countries, yet the law is not implemented. And it's mainly directed by the social norms that always put the woman in the corner when it comes to accessibility to land. And even if she has the will to say no to that, then she, in most of the cases, often don't have access to the legal system. And this is very specific to those who are living in the rural areas. In terms how you mobilize resources to incentivize policy change or even to bring the topic on the policy policy making level, it's the grassroots movements that use complementary data and that use local collected data to promote the usage of these data to change some of the realities on the ground. So the change in this regard needs to come from a grassroots movement rather than from a top-down approach, because we know there were so many good practices in the region, but again, the social norms are blocking these practices when it comes to the legal system. Thank you. I think I will pass it to Ward. You have the big one.
Yeah, thank you. I'll focus on one question on incentives for states, but just for Amina, I asked Rita to join the team, the panel. She's part of the custodians working on the data collection and methodologies and on customary land rights. They are accounted for, but Rita will be able to develop that. On incentives for governments and states to report and to provide the data, it's our daily battle for many of us here, from the civil society perspective, but also from the UN perspective and from our members, the UN members, the states perspective. So I'll give five ways of how we're trying to incentivize states, to push states. Of course, we do not have a legitimacy to push and to oblige states to report. The SDGs are voluntary reporting processes, but there's ways, processes, tools that we can use, that we develop in order to get states to report more. First of all is to showcase the need, and that's what we're doing here in a scientific practitioner political forum. Showcase that there is a shortage of reporting, there's a shortage of data, etc., in order to incentivize, well, make visible the need and incentivize the states to report. That's one. The second one is what Shah just mentioned and what Eva is working on is complementary data sources, and make sure that all these data sources that are out there, Prindex is one example, but there's many others at the different levels, global. But in the previous presentation, there was the Land and Gender Observatory of Morocco, which was a good case. How do we mobilize all these complementary data sources in order to, again, give visibility to the states that this data exists, but also to feed them into the reporting processes. The problem here is that the state will recognize these data sources. They will say they do exist, but then they will come with other excuses. Is it strong enough? Who produced it? It's biased, etc., etc. And so you need to go beyond the existence of data and try to make states accept, recognize, and legitimize the complementary data sources as well. And that brings me to the third point, where certain countries, and with the help of the UN Statistical Division, is establishing multi-stakeholder platforms for data, where civil society, states, private sector, data providers, research, etc., sit together and provide data on certain topics. And here, if, first of all, the indicators, secondly, the data sources, and thirdly, the methodologies are agreed upon, then it becomes more complicated for the states not to accept that these data doesn't exist, of course. They're worked on together, they're accepted together, and so they're part of the same pool. And so some of the countries have engaged in multi-stakeholder platforms. Colombia is one, Kenya is one, Indonesia, Canada is famous for this as well. Fourthly is legitimizing very similar data sources in other frameworks and aligning these different frameworks. And yesterday we had a panel on UNCCD and CBD, where we are now developing land tenure indicators that are aligned to the SDG indicators. The difference is that reporting in the frameworks of UNCCD and CBD is complementary, is compulsory, sorry. Is compulsory. And so if the data sets, if the indicators are aligned, then of course, if it is compulsory in one framework, it would automatically feed the other framework. But we're not there yet. We are still negotiating these indicators. They are adopted now in the case of CBD, but the methodology is still to be worked out. In UNCCD, we have still more work to be done. And then lastly, my last point is that we are creating and thinking and trying to develop what I would call commitment forums. An example is the Global Land Agenda, in which some of us are part of, where we are pushing the states towards more commitment. These are multi-stakeholder platforms at global level that bring together the states in order to take more commitment towards land in general, but then also towards reporting in particular. One event that will come out of there is hopefully in 2026, the ICARD, the International Conference on Agrarian Reform, which we see as a type of a summit or a type of the COP, where we hope that states will come forward and effectively commit towards engagement to land and reporting. And that should ideally then be followed up on an annual basis, either through the World Bank Forum conference, but also through the CFS and its civil society and other mechanisms to track then the commitment taken by the states.
شكرا للمتدخلين عن الأسئلة. I will respond in Arabic.
Thank you for all the speakers.
بالنسبة للمتدخلة الأولى أستاذة أمينة، صراحة هذا الإشكال الذي طرحتيه المتعلق هل نتحدث عن الرسم العقاري أو هل نتحدث عن أي تعريف آخر للملكية، هذا هو يعني إشكال حقيقي يعني طرح لي في دراسة حول يعني تطبيق المؤشرات في المغرب، يعني ويتحدث عن كون يجب أن تكون أي سند للملكية فيه إحساس أصلا بالأمان. فبالتالي هل الرسم العقاري يعطي الأمان للمرأة؟ هل كذلك أي نوع آخر من سندات الملكية يعطي إحساس بالأمان للمرأة؟ يعني الإشكالية هي في أن يكون الرسم أصلا مؤسس لهذه الملكية، وأن يكون الرسم له تأثير بالإحساس بالأمان عند المرأة. إذن فهذه إشكالية مطروحة صراحة، وربما في يعني بنية المؤشر لم تأخذ بعين الاعتبار هذه المسألة، فكان لها أثر في تحصيل البيانات وجمعها وكيفية يعني وضعها. السؤال الآخر يعني إشكالية عدم وجود نظام موحد لجمع المعطيات. كذلك نفس المشكل وقع لنا، اشتغلنا على دراسة حول شمال إفريقيا، دول شمال إفريقيا، فوجدنا أنه ليست هناك منهجية متناسقة من أجل جمع المعطيات. فبالتالي عندما أردنا أن نعطي رؤية عامة حول يعني المؤشرات في شمال إفريقيا لم نجد طريقة نقوم بها بذلك، فبالتالي لا يمكن أن تضع صورة عامة حول يعني مجموعة من الدول، بحكم أنه لا توجد هناك طريقة والمنهجية مشتركة. فهذا إشكال كله يعتمد كذلك على طريقة تنزيل يعني هذه المؤشرات. بالنسبة يعني جوزيف تحدثت عن مسألة الإرث في الشريعة الإسلامية. يعني المتدخل الأخير تحدث على أن هناك نعم خارج الشريعة. سأعطيك مثال اليوم في المغرب. يعني فهذه الإشكالية أنه الشريعة والنصوص يعني تعطي للمرأة حق الولوج إلى الأرض، ولكن الإشكاليات العرفية والثقافية تمنع دون تطبيق هذه المسألة. في آخر يعني اليوم النقاش في المغرب بأعطي مثال هو في تعديل مدونة الأسرة أو مدونة الأحوال الشخصية، فتم النظر بشكل اجتهادي في كيفية إمكانية حماية المرأة أثناء وفاة زوجها في البقاء ببيتها واستعماله إلى حد وفاتها. فبالتالي اليوم نحن أمام طريقة لحماية المرأة، رغم أن الشرع يسمح بتقسيم البيت، إلا أنه هناك اجتهاد فقهي يسمح بعدم تقسيمه حتى يعني تتوفى المرأة وبالتالي يتم حماية وجودها في البيت. هذه النقطة الأولى. الاجتهاد الثاني الذي هو اليوم بصدد التطبيق وهو أنه يمكن للأب في حالة ما إذا كان عنده فقط بنات أن يعني يملكهن جميع ثروته دون أن ينتظر حتى يموت. فبالتالي يمكن للبنات أن يتمكن من الحصول على الأرض والولوج إليها يعني حتى قبل أن يتم الوصول إلى مرحلة ما بعد الوفاة وبالتالي تكتسب الإرث. فهذه اجتهادات سمحت ربما في تطبيقها بحماية قبلية للمرأة دون أن تجد نفسها في صراع كما تحدثت في صراع مع إخوتها ومع أعمامها مع أخوالها لأنه المعطى الثقافي في هل تختار المرأة بين البقاء داخل حوض الأسرة والرجال أو تختار الوصول إلى الملكية وبالتالي هناك انشقاق وهناك كذلك واحد يعني خلافات ثم كذلك بعجالة سأتحدث عن إشكالية المعطيات وتأثيرها على اتخاذ القرارات والسياسات. ففي غياب أصلا المعطيات اليوم هناك إشكال غياب المعطيات في منطقة شمال إفريقيا والوطن العربي. فبالتالي في غياب هذه المعطيات لا يمكن أن نعرف هل السياسات التي تم وضعها كان لها أثر إيجابي في الرفع من ولوج المرأة إلى الأرض وحمايته، وكذلك في غياب هذه المعطيات لا يمكن أن تكون لدينا أرضية لتقييم هذه الوضعية وبالتالي رسم سياسات أخرى جديدة. فأظن أن يعني لتقييم السياسة وبناء السياسة لا بد من الحصول على البيانات والوضعية والمعطيات حتى نتمكن من يعني التفكير في هذه المسألة. فأظن يعني أنه قمت بإحاطة بعموم الأسئلة. كذلك من بين الإشكالات طرحتها السائلة السيدة لطيفة أظن يعني تحدثت عن إشكالية إلزامية نشر البيانات. ربما خلال الدراسة التي قمنا بها في شمال إفريقيا وجدنا أنه البيانات التي تحترم مقاربة النوع يعني لا توجد حتى في المواقع الرسمية وكذلك في المواقع الرسمية. لم نستطع إلى اليوم إنتاج بيانات تأخذ بعين الاعتبار جانب يعني خصوصية المرأة في الولوج لا إلى السكن ولا إلى الأرض الفلاحية ولا إلى غيرها من الحقوق الملكية. ربما ما زالت طريق طويلة من أجل الوصول إلى هذه المعطيات، ولكن يعني الوعي أساس بداية كل تغيير في هذا المجال. وأشكركم.
progress to do. Thank you.
Yes, of course. I'll be very quick.
طبعا سأكون مختصرا. شكرا على دعوتي لإجابة هذا السؤال.
Votre question était posée en français par rapport à la
سؤالي سيكون
reconnaissance
بالفرنسية.
des droits coutumiers des femmes à la terre. Et ça, c'est un aspect qu'on mesure à travers l'indicateur 5A2 des ODD. C'est le proxy
This indicator we measure it,
uniquement applicable aux pays qui reconnaissent formellement, que ce soit dans la Constitution ou dans les lois foncières, l'existence de lois de normes coutumières ou bien l'existence d'un système foncier coutumier. Et donc le Maroc a en fait une très bonne pratique et d'ailleurs le Maroc est en train de collecter les données pour présenter son rapport sur l'ODD 5A2. Donc il va bientôt faire partie des pays de la région qui ont déjà présenté le rapport. On en a déjà 11 et c'est pas rien. Et donc ce proxy E, qu'est-ce qu'on regarde? On regarde déjà donc la reconnaissance formelle du système de droit coutumier ou de la tenure coutumière et on va regarder s'il y a une protection des droits des femmes dans le cadre de ce système coutumier. Et le Maroc l'a fait à travers cette loi qui a été adoptée en 2019 et la reconnaissance formelle des droits des femmes sous les miettes à justement pouvoir... Alors je sais que c'est pas... Évidemment c'est une première étape, mais c'est très important parce qu'on a une formalisation de ces droits coutumiers et surtout une protection des droits des femmes dans ce cadre coutumier. Donc nous, on présente en tant que bonne pratique, et c'est d'ailleurs ce qui a valu au Maroc donc un proxy. Donc les proxys, c'est c'est 6 proxys juridiques qui permettent de mesurer l'indicateur, et ça fait partie des bonnes pratiques qui sont encouragées par la méthodologie 5A2. Et un dernier point, I'll switch to English. I just wanted to also answer some questions regarding how can we encourage countries to report on these indicators. I wanted to emphasize that FAO is providing technical supports to countries, including, of course, in the region, and we have, as I said, Morocco, which is currently reporting, but we also had Jordan, Palestine, Oman, Lebanon, just a few that have already presented their report, and thanks to FAO's technical support. So really the aim as custodian agency is to support, to provide capacity development, to help stakeholders collect the data, but also to help them monitor the data in a sustainable manner. So this is what we are trying to do. And of course, multi-actor platforms, and we have two colleagues here from FAO Mauritania who can tell you more about it after this session, as Mauritania's multi-actor platforms has played an important role in the collection of data on SDG indicator 582. So thank you very much. And,
thank you. Yes? Okay. We're going to have to end. This was fantastic. We're being evicted. The conversation can continue. Thank you for all of your inputs. I think we could, if you want to get involved with the Stand for Her Land campaign, I would encourage you to approach Shad, also working with ILC on this. Let's continue the discussion, but thank you very much. We're rolling right into the next breakout session.
شكرا لكم.